Well, hey everyone, happy Friday. This is the fourth of our 5 Devos in our series this week on the big butts of the Bible. And today I'm going to be bringing you guys a devotion from the book of Micah in chapter 7. Now, today I'm going to be using my smartphone because the translation that I normally read, the New King James Version, utilizes the word therefore as opposed to but. So for this, I had to pull out my Blue Letter Bible electronic app, and I'm going to be reading from the NIV version. We're going to start here in Micah chapter 7 with verse 5. It says, "Do not trust a neighbor. Put no confidence in a friend. Even with the woman who lies in your embrace, guard the words of your lips. For a son dishonors his father. A daughter rises up against her mother. A daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the members of his own household. But as for me, I will watch and hope for the Lord. I wait for God, my Savior. My God will hear me." This verse here gives us the idea, and I'm sure you guys and all of us have experienced this at some point in our lives, where we feel like we're completely alone and abandoned, and there's nobody else that we can turn to. Well, that's how the prophet Micah feels here when he's writing out these words. You see, this was at a time that he was warning the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, but mostly the kingdom of Judah, of the pending judgment that God was going to enact on them in the form of the Babylonian exile. And we see here in these words that essentially Micah felt like he was the only good, the only moral person, the only godly man on earth, and that there was nobody else that he could turn to. He was essentially saying in these words that even family members couldn't turn to each other. We see it here at the end of verse 6 where it says, "A man's enemies are the members of his own household." And maybe you felt like that or either previously or currently, that there's some situation or some problem or some trouble that you're dealing with in your life, and that there's nobody else that you can turn to for guidance or for help or for relief. But look here at how Micah responded to his circumstance, where he felt like he was all alone and abandoned. And we see that there's 3 things that he did here in verse 7. "But as for me, I watch and hope for the Lord." So that's the first thing that Micah did. He watched for God. He kept his eyes fixed on God. 2, I wait for God, my Savior. So that's the second thing. He waited for God, waited for his perfect timing. And then the third thing, we see here at the end of this verse, it says, "My God will hear me," is that Micah cried out to God and he prayed for God for deliverance, essentially. You see, Micah knew that his timing wasn't God's timing, that his plans weren't God's plans, that God's plans were better than his plans, and that God was going to make everything beautiful in his own time. And he wasn't alive when this took place, but eventually God did deliver the Israelites back from their captivity and free them from the Babylonians, even though it wasn't maybe necessary when they expected or when they wanted, or the type of deliverance that they pictured or envisioned. God eventually did hear them, hear their cries, hear Micah's cries, hear the Israelites' cries, and delivered them. And so maybe you've been, or maybe you currently are in a similar situation where you feel like there's nobody else in your corner. You picture the boxer in a boxing ring. They've got their crew, their team in the corner. Well, imagine that there's nobody else. You don't have your team. There's nobody else in your corner, and it's just you. And although it may feel like that, I'm here to tell you that, and these words remind us that you are not alone, that God is always on your side. He's always going to be your champion, your fighter, your protector. We're reminded that as well in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. We're reminded that God's never going to leave us, and he's never going to forsake us. And even when we're in a tough pickle, even when we're in tough circumstances, even when it doesn't seem like God is there, even when we can't see God, we know he is always working behind the scenes. Although even if his plan comes at a different time than what we expected. So today I want you guys to take comfort in the fact that you are not alone, that God is always with you. And no matter what you're going through right now, you can take comfort in the fact that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that there is going to be better circumstances down the road, that the sun is going to rise, that dawn is going to come. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be the day after that. It may not be the end of this month. It may not be at the end of this year. But we're reminded that God is still working, that God is in control, that he's got a plan for your life, and that there's eventually going to be good that's going to come out of whatever situation you're currently in. You just have to do those three things that Micah did here in this verse, in verse 7, is keep your eyes fixed on God. Wait for his perfect timing and trust in him and have faith that his plan is better than your plan. And constantly be praying to him to strengthen your faith, to not lose trust in him, and for him to be able to deliver you from whatever situation you're in. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and we'll see you here next week for another Devo series.